The call from Ironwood arrived on a Tuesday. They always do. A town hemorrhaging from a gash no one can name. Contracting a healer they refuse to acknowledge exists. The sheriff said people were being hollowed out. That phrase caught my ear, and it made Rex whimper from the passenger seat. I pressed the phone harder against my face, the highway unrolling ahead like a dull gray ribbon through the evergreens. Hollowed how? Sheriff Ava Rostova had a voice like gravel tumbling down corrugated steel. Their minds go empty, like someone reached inside and scooped out everything that made them who they are. 4 cases in 3 weeks. 2 dead, 2 still breathing, but nobody's home. I glanced at Rex. His ears were flattened, dark eyes locked on the road ahead. He always sensed it before I did when a job would turn ugly. I'll be there by dusk. She hung up without farewell. They never say goodbye. Bad luck, maybe. Or maybe they're too desperate for niceties. The drive to Ironwood took 6 hours. 6 hours of watching the landscape slide from familiar to alien, from the comforting sprawl of civilization to the crushing solitude of the Pacific Northwest wilds. I spent the time the way I always did, inspecting gear, gaming scenarios, talking to Rex about nothing important, because sometimes my own voice was the only thing keeping the quiet from swallowing me whole. My equipment lay scattered across the rear seat in controlled chaos. Silver powder shells for the shotgun, iron shavings in sealed glass files, a custom EMF meter my uncle had rebuilt before he vanished, its coils rewired with copper and patterns I still didn't fully grasp. Salt, sage, digital voice recorder, thermal camera, and tucked in the glove box, wrapped in oil-stained cloth like scripture, the Vade Mecum, my uncle's journal, his life's work condensed into 6 commandments that had kept me breathing these past 8 years. 8 years since I found him in that barn outside Sedona. 8 years since I ignored his warnings about the Wendigo. Thought I knew better. Thought I could manage alone. He came searching when I went dark. By the time I arrived, all that remained was his journal and a trail of bloody footprints vanishing into the desert. The thing had taken him because I'd been cocky, because I'd treated the rules as guidelines instead of laws written in the blood of everyone who came before. I learned the hard way that this trade offers no forgiveness and no second chances. Rule number 2, Rex, I said, scratching behind his ears as we rolled through a dead zone of signal. The hound sees truth. Your eyes deceive. Your ears deceive. Your instruments can fail. But you never lie to me, do you, boy? He licked my hand, then returned to staring through the windshield with that fierce focus working dogs carry. Rex wasn't a pet. He was a teammate. A Belgian Malinois trained to detect the fundamental wrongness that cryptids drag behind them like a stench. Most humans filter it out, rationalize it away. Animals know when something breaks the natural order. Rex had saved my life 3 times. I kept score. The first was Vermont, when I walked straight past a skinwalker wearing a trooper's skin. Rex threw himself between us, hackles raised, showing me what my eyes refused to see. The second was New Mexico, when he refused to let me enter a cave that looked harmless, but reeked of something nameless and hungry. The third was 6 months ago in Montana. I still don't like thinking about Montana. Ironwood announced itself with a shot-up sign. Welcome to Ironwood, Oregon. Population 847. Someone had recently spray-painted "Get Out" in dripping red. The town looked like it had been dying for decades and had finally decided to finish the job. Main Street was a hallway of boarded windows and sagging roofs. The few souls I saw shuffled with heads down, shoulders curved inward, as if walking through a private hurricane. No eye contact, no lingering. I felt it instantly, that particular flavor of wrongness that accompanies a cryptid infestation. The air was too still, too hushed. Even the birds had fled. It reminded me of Chernobyl photos, not because of radiation, but because of absence. The absence of ordinary life, ordinary noise, the background hum that says people live here. This was a town holding its breath. The sheriff's station was a squat brick box at the end of Main, windows barred, flag drooping from a rusted pole. I parked. Rex leapt out first, circling the building with nose to the ground. I let him work. If anything lurked, he'd find it before my meters twitched. Sheriff Rostova waited inside, standing behind a desk that hadn't been cleared since the Clinton years. Late 40s, iron gray hair and a severe bun, eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. She looked at me the way most cops look at me, like I was either a fraud or something worse. Silas Vance. That's me. You don't look like much. I get that a lot. I offered my hand. She ignored it. Professional courtesy only stretched so far. She dropped a thick folder on the desk. 4 victims. First was Marcus Deal, 63, retired logger, found in his truck on Old Mill Road. Engine idling, eyes open, nothing behind them. Couldn't speak, couldn't move. Died 3 days later. Official cause, stroke. I've seen strokes, Mr. Vance. This wasn't one. I opened the folder. Crime scene photos. A man slumped over the wheel, face slack, but the eyes erased, like someone had scrubbed the soul clean, leaving only the meat running on autopilot. Marcus drove that route 40 years, Rostova said, voice tight. Knew every pothole, every bend. That morning his wife said he woke screaming about a man in the trees, smiling at him. She thought nightmare. 3 hours later, we found him. Second victim, Sarah Chen, 27, elementary teacher. Found fully clothed in her bathtub, staring at the ceiling. Same story, gone. She's still technically alive at county, but there's nothing left to save. Her roommate said Sarah had been jumpy for days, claiming she saw children in the school basement who weren't on any roster, children whose smiles were too wide. The pattern was forming. Smiling figures, impossible sightings, minds trying to translate the incomprehensible into the language of terror. The other two, Thomas Wickett, 41, hardware store owner, found catatonic in his own shop, staring at an empty aisle. Security footage showed him conversing with thin air for 20 minutes before he simply switched off. And yesterday, Jennifer Marsh, 16. Her mother found her in the basement. Rostova's fists clenched. The girl had been screaming about the smiling man in the woods. Her mother said it came from an old rhyme the kids used to chant. Playground nonsense. But Jennifer was terrified of something real enough to shatter her mind. I studied the sheriff's face. She was holding something back. Something personal. How long have you lived in Ironwood, Sheriff? My whole life. Born here. Thought I'd die here. A bitter twist of her mouth. Now I'm not sure which is preferable. You've seen this before. It wasn't a question. She held my gaze a long moment, then nodded once. When I was 7 or 8, there was a bad summer. People started acting strange, seeing things. My uncle was one of them. He walked into the forest one night. We found him 3 days later. Empty. The whole thing lasted a month, then stopped like someone threw a switch. How long ago? Almost 40 years. To the day. There it was. The cycle. Whatever was doing this had done it before, and it would do it again unless I stopped it. I need to see the Marsh house. Figured you'd say that. I'll drive. The Marsh house sat on the edge of town where pavement surrendered to trees. The tree line felt less like a border and more like a threat. Mrs. Marsh opened the door with red-rimmed eyes and the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept since her daughter vanished into herself. Sheriff said you might help, she whispered. I'm going to try, ma'am. She let us in. The house was spotless, the frantic kind of clean that comes from trying to scrub away horror. Rex stayed glued to my leg, nostrils flaring, processing scents I couldn't begin to imagine. Where did you find Jennifer? Basement. She went down for laundry and started screaming. I ran down. She was just standing there, staring at the closet, screaming about the smiling man. Then she stopped, like someone flipped her off. Can I see the basement? She pointed to a door off the kitchen. I descended slowly, Rex in front, moving deliberate. Each step felt colder, like sinking into dark water. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed studs, the usual suburban clutter. And in the far corner, a cheap plywood closet with a brass knob. Rex halted 3 feet away. Hackles rose in a slow wave. A low growl rumbled. Not aggression, fear. I'd rarely heard that from him. I stepped closer, pulled the EMF meter. Needle dead. Thermal camera. Nothing. The closet registered as perfectly ordinary, but Rex was growling at emptiness. Rule number 2. The hound sees truth. I didn't open the door. I crouched beside Rex, hand on his neck. His muscles quivered. I believe you, boy. I took photos, made notes, sketched the layout. Whatever had been here had left a scar only older parts of the brain could feel. I asked Mrs. Marsh about the rhyme. She remembered fragments. A man in the woods with too many teeth who took children who strayed too far. The smiling man sees. The smiling man knows. The smiling man follows wherever you go. Local folklore, but specific to this valley. By the time we left, the sun was bleeding orange across the treetops like the sky itself had been cut. Rostova had booked me into the Pines Motel, the only place still renting rooms. Room 7 smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. I let Rex clear it first. He checked corners under the bed, behind the shower curtain, then flopped by the door with a sigh. Clear. I unpacked, set motion sensors, and sat on the bed with the Vade Mecum in my lap. The leather was soft from years of handling, first my uncle's, then mine. I could still feel the ghost of his grip. I opened to the first rule, written in his neat, urgent hand. Rule number 1, the bait in the mirror. The worst cryptids don't hunt flesh, they hunt minds. They will wear what you desire or dread most. Trust nothing your mind offers without external proof. I'd read it 1,000 times, lived it. I stood to draw the curtains, and in the window's reflection, I saw him. Not my face, his. Uncle Martin, grinning with that crooked half-smile he gave when I solved a hard puzzle. But his eyes were too wide, too bright, and his mouth kept stretching, until it split his face into a grotesque rictus. Teeth too numerous, too sharp. Behind them, endless black, like staring into a well with no bottom. My hand went to my pistol. I spun. Nothing. Room empty. Rex asleep. Sensors silent. EMF flat. Nothing there, but I'd seen him. Rule number 1. I holstered the weapon with shaking hands and sat back down. Sweat chilled on my skin despite the cold. It was already inside my head, already learning what would break me. It knew about Martin. Knew my worst guilt. I opened the journal again, flipping through sketches, photos, warnings scrawled in frantic margins. And there it was, the entry circled in thick black 3 weeks before he died. 2 words on an otherwise blank page. The glimmer. I stared until the letters seemed to writhe. I did not sleep. At dawn, I cross-referenced my uncle's fragmented notes with the case files. The pattern emerged like a photograph developing in acid. 4 victims in 3 weeks. Before that, nothing for 40 years. Before that, 1985, 7 victims. Before that, 1945, 6. Before that, 1905, clockwork. The epicenter, Blackwood Mine, 3 miles northeast, abandoned after a collapse killed 11 men in 1903, sealed by court order in 1906. Rex padded over, rested his head on my knee. Morning, boy. We're going into a hole today. You'll hate it. He licked my hand anyway. By 8, I was at the town library, a brick relic that looked transplanted from New England. The librarian was a white-haired woman in her 70s, with eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "You're the one the sheriff called," she said. "Not a question. Silas Vance. Eleanor Blackwood." She watched for a reaction. "Yes, that Blackwood. Married in, not born to it. What do you need?" "Everything on the mine. The collapse. The men. Especially anything about a man named Elias." Her hands clenched. Elias Blackwood. That name hasn't been spoken aloud here in decades. Most folks know better. She led me to the archives, a dim room thick with the smell of old paper. She pulled a box of brittle clippings and photographs, handling them like relics. Elias Blackwood was my husband's great-great-uncle. Owned the mine. Lived alone on the ridge. They said he spoke to things that weren't there, bargained with shadows. When miners started vanishing in the tunnels, seeing impossible things, they blamed him. She laid out a photograph. A gaunt man with hollow cheeks and a carved-on smile. In 1906, they accused him of murder, witchcraft, driving men insane. They walled him alive in the deepest shaft and left him to rot. And that's when the cycles began, I said. No, her voice dropped. That's when the cycles began to space themselves 40 years apart. Before they sealed him, the madness was constant. I photographed everything. You're going up there, aren't you? I have to. Then know this. People who go looking for Elias Blackwood come back changed, if they come back at all. My husband went 20 years ago, wanted to understand his bloodline, came back speaking in riddles, seeing things in mirrors, hung himself 3 weeks later. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be careful. And whatever you do, don't speak his name up there. Names have weight in places like that, but I'd already spoken it twice, and something had heard. The road to Blackwood Mine deteriorated into dirt, and then nothing. Rex sat rigid beside me, nostrils flaring as we climbed. A mile out, the forest went silent. No birds, no insects, wind muffled. My dash-mounted EMF began spiking wildly. Rule number 5, the stain of the hunt. Look for secondary signs. Plants grew in spirals. Bark etched with symbols that hurt to read. Mushrooms in perfect circles. The entrance gaped like a wound in the hillside. Timbers rotted, chain recently snapped. I loaded iron dust shells, grabbed flares, recorder running. Rex pressed against my leg, trembling but resolute. Last chance to stay in the truck, boy. He looked at me with those dark, steady eyes. We both knew he wouldn't. The mine was colder than physics allowed. My breath plumed. The flashlight beam died too quickly, swallowed by darkness thicker than absence. 50 feet in, a child's drawing pinned to a beam, dated August 1985. Stick figures around a tall, thin man with too many teeth, all smiling. Caption in crayon: "The smiling man says we'll be happy forever." Rex's growl became a continuous tremor. Deeper, the tunnels twisted. My chalk marks faded almost as fast as I made them. Then I heard it. Faint. Echoing. A child singing the rhyme. Rex froze. Then did something I'd never seen. He whined, high and submissive, belly almost to the ground. Easy, boy. The air ahead shimmered like heat haze. A little girl stepped out. Dirty blonde hair, torn blue dress, hands clasped, trembling. Please help me. I'm lost. Every instinct screamed to run to her. Then I remembered rule number 1. I struck a flare. Red light flooded the tunnel. Her shadow on the wall had too many joints, a mouth that opened sideways, teeth like shattered bottles. The thing shrieked, metal tearing, children screaming, every nightmare compressed, and vanished with a sound like ripping canvas. Rex bolted. I followed, flare high until daylight hit us. We stood gasping in the poisoned forest. I'd faced horrors before. This one had reached into my mind and served me exactly what would make me drop every defense. Back at the library, Eleanor Blackwood waited, as if she'd known I'd return. You saw it. I saw something. And you spoke his name before you came here, didn't you? I didn't answer. She sighed. It's been waiting for someone to come looking, someone to speak the name and open the door. Elias Blackwood was real. The accusations were real. When they walled him in, they didn't kill him. They trapped him. And what he became in the dark has been learning. Every 40 years it wakes, feeds on the town's fear, on our guilt for what our ancestors did. A thought form, I said. A psychic entity born from pain and collective shame. If you prefer clinical terms, yes. I need every story, every ritual, every weakness. Rule number 3, research is a weapon. For 2 hours, she poured out everything the town had tried to bury. When she finished, I stood. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. Eleanor. And Mr. Vance. If you mean to kill it, understand this. Speaking his name gives it power over you. My husband learned that the hard way. Rule number 4, the price of a name. Then you understand. Don't say it again unless you're ready to face what answers. I was at the door when I said it anyway. Elias Blackwood. Nothing for a heartbeat. Then every light in the library stuttered and died. In the dark, I heard Eleanor gasp, Rex growl, and far away, yet impossibly close, a child laughing. Emergency lights bathed us in sickly green. It knows you now, she whispered. It knows your voice, your face. It'll come for you. I nodded. That's what I'm counting on. The attacks began that night. Back at the motel, Rex paced, ears swiveling, whining. Sensors showed nothing, but we both knew better. I spread the vademecum and studied my uncle's notes on psychic entities. Oblivion is the only escape. What cannot be remembered cannot exist. I was reading that line for the 6th time when I heard him. You're getting close, Silas. My uncle's voice, behind me. I spun, hand on pistol, but stopped. Rule number 1. I looked at Rex. He stared at the corner, head tilted, uncertain. His infallible instincts scrambled. Look at me, nephew. I closed my eyes. You're not real. Open your eyes and find out. Rex, is something there? He whined. Confusion, not warning. You got me killed, Silas. You know that, don't you? I kept my eyes shut. You're not him. I came looking for you in Sedona. Told you the Wendigo was beyond you, but you wouldn't wait. When it took me, where were you? The guilt hit like a fist. I opened my eyes. Corner empty. Rex still trembling. Psychological warfare, I muttered. It's inside my head. I called Rostova. Voicemail. Station. No answer. Cold dread settled in my gut. Rex, come. The sheriff's station was dark except for emergency strips. Front door ajar. I drew my weapon. Rex moved ahead in perfect formation. We found Rostova seated at her desk, upright, hands flat, eyes open, empty. On the desk, scrawled in her handwriting, over and over until the words blurred, "It learns. It learns." Rex pressed against my leg, whining. It was accelerating, eliminating threats. Rule number 6, you are also being hunted. Driving back, I saw her, a woman in white at the roadside, illuminated by headlights. Long, dark hair, unmoving. Rex went berserk, slamming against the window, foaming. She smiled my mother's smile. Dead 12 years. I floored it. Rex was still frantic when we reached the room. The glimmer wasn't just hunting me, it was breaking my dog. I locked us in, set every ward, and sat with the journal. It was a psychic parasite born of Elias Blackwood's agony and a century of inherited guilt. It manifested whatever would shatter its target fastest. Oblivion is the only escape. The weakness wasn't a bullet, it was erasure. I had to sever its tether to collective memory, make the town forget it ever existed. To do that, I needed to draw it out at full strength, see how deep it was rooted. I needed to be bait. Terrible idea, I told Rex. He watched me with worried eyes. If I lose myself, you run. Understand? He didn't answer. I sat cross-legged, weapons close, and did the unthinkable. I stopped fighting. I let myself remember Sedona fully. The barn, the screams, the blood-warm pages. The temperature plunged. Rex barked behind an invisible wall. My uncle stepped from the shimmer. Perfect. Unchanged. Real. It's okay, Silas. I forgive you. Tears burned. Rex, no. I reached. Rex hit me like a missile. Pain snapped me. I saw the shadow on the wall. Too many limbs, mouth opening forever. Now! Rex lunged. The thing wearing my uncle's face shrieked and seized Rex by the throat. My dog yelped. I fired blessed iron into the shadow. The manifestation melted, reformed into something my brain refused to parse, then collapsed inward and vanished. Rex dropped, trembling, no visible wounds but deeply hurt. I held him while he shook. You saved me again. I'd nearly taken forgiveness from a monster, but now I knew it could be injured, and I knew how to kill it. Some monsters aren't slain, they're forgotten. I spent the night building the silence generator from my uncle's plans. Copper coils, iron nodes, chemicals tuned to kill thought itself. By dawn, Rex could barely stand, but when I grabbed the keys, he limped to my side. Last hunt, boy. The forest around the mine had worsened overnight. Trees blackened, birds frozen mid-flight, air thin. I built the array around the entrance. Copper circles, iron filings, batteries rigged to broadcast oblivion frequencies. At 3 RPM, I spoke the name, Elias Blackwood. The mine exploded with forms, smiling man, lost children, my dead, the sheriff, and beneath them all the writhing truth of what he'd become. The chorus of screams nearly burst my eardrums. Blood streamed from my nose. Rex collapsed, convulsing. I hit the switch. Silence fell, not absence of sound, but the presence of nothing. Color drained from the world. The glimmer thrashed, throwing every horror it had. I emptied my mind completely, became the void. It starved. Forms blurred, voices faded to static, then to less than silence. The forest around us died in fast forward, leaves falling, bark crumbling, mushrooms liquefying. My vision tunneled, lungs burning, but I turned the dial past redline. One final scream, like reality itself tearing, then nothing, a hole in the world that sealed over. The oppressive weight lifted from Ironwood as if a storm had passed. The generator smoked and died. I collapsed beside Rex. He was breathing. I held him and let myself shake. I had become the eraser. A week later, the town was forgetting. People walked taller. Victims woke with holes in memory, but alive. Sheriff Rostova stopped me on Main Street, frowned, asked if I was lost. Just leaving. Stay safe, she said, already forgetting my name. Eleanor Blackwood would remember nothing of our talks. The sign now simply read, "Welcome to Ironwood, Oregon. Population 847. The graffiti was gone. Rex lay in the passenger seat, head on my lap, senses dulled forever. I started the engine. Another town was already bleeding somewhere, waiting for a surgeon they didn't want to admit existed. I drove into the gray ribbon of highway and tried to forget, because some monsters aren't killed. They're just unanswered, and I have to live with the silence I created.